So we're back, and now that we've got all our skincare prepped and all our skincare chat out of the way, I'm gonna get ready for some foundation.
Amazing.
So I'm just gonna start this the way I normally would any other makeup. So close. So we have done our prep, but I'm just gonna give a bit of a mist, and I'm gonna use a tiny little drop, like literally just one drop with the face oil, just to kind of refresh and help the makeup base kind of have a little moment.
Do you like to leave the mist still a little bit damp on the skin?
Yes,
before the oil?
so it's almost kind of just the emulsion effect of putting oil on top of water, and I feel like it seals in the moisture of the water, and then it also kind of almost helps the oil kind of sit on top and create that lovely barrier, for lack of a better word. So I like this base a lot. It adds a bit of brightness and radiance, and I really love starting a makeup with some sort of radiance base or primer that can shine through any foundation to get that really lit from within look.
So this is the Cooler Caramel makeup base, isn't it?
Yeah, I like to use my fingers a lot. Some people prefer to use a brush. I kind of vary, because you're going to see in a minute around Mel's chin where she's got a bit more activity. We're just I prefer to use a brush on those bits, because sometimes, you know, the fingers can just be a bit too irritating.
I'd love to get your tips for how to cover any sort of red
marks. Well, let's do that. So now we're going to use some foundation. So new to Glow Organic is the Sappho, which I've just really discovered. And they're Canadian like me, which is awesome. So I always start with a half a pump, and then you can always add more. And for myself, I tend to use my fingers on my own face, but I have to say I often use a brush for a client.
So this foundation is a very, it's kind of a light to medium coverage.
It's super nice. The texture is super nice. So I only tried it for the first time the other day, and I really like it. I'm adding a bit more because I've only gone in with these like little quarter pumps at a time, and it's not that you need so much. Because it's new to me, I'm just gauging the amount, to be totally honest. And a really good thing to do is to pat wherever you want more coverage. So I always start with foundation before concealer, because I feel like you get half of the job done. So, but then I can pat in areas, but where I know I'm going to be applying a concealer a bit later on, I don't stress too much about getting a full coverage right away.
So you do a light layer all over.
Yeah.
And then where you need a little bit more coverage, you'd use a brush and pat it.
Yeah, or you can pat with your finger as well. It's just a patting motion, keeps it more in one place, whereas a swiping motion is more blended. I like using a foundation a little bit everywhere, because I think it just starts off as a sort of more even canvas. Even if I'm going to allow some of the natural skin, maybe freckles or marks to come through, like it doesn't need to be a full coverage every time. But if it's just a bit of redness that doesn't require a full-on concealer, then the foundation can do its job. The finish is really nice, like it's like kind of dewy. It's like a really soft.
Yeah, it's got a nice glow, hasn't it?
Yeah, really pretty.
It's very natural on the skin. It's not a heavy foundation that looks kind of too cakey.
No, and I actually tried a sample yesterday on a shoot, and it's so light, and it was a very young girl, like with beautiful skin, but she just had like 2 different zones, so I wanted to bring it all together, and it was just beautiful. It just disappeared. Sometimes I do a little tap to blend it, especially if there's quite a lot of skincare underneath. It just almost like pushes it into the skin a little bit. So now we're gonna go for a bit of concealer, and actually I do this really funny thing if I'm doing it on someone else. For myself, I use the Hint concealer. I stick my 4th finger in and I pat it together, and I just go tick, 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 tick around my eyes.
Yeah.
But on someone else, it's always different.
On myself, I always just use fingers for concealer. I just find the warmth of your finger really helps it to blend into the skin.
Yeah, the only thing is sometimes, like if I have like because I have really bad dark circles, so if my dark circles are particularly bad on a day and I know I need to apply more product, I use a brush, because sometimes I find my finger pulls more of it back.
Yeah.
But that's not every day. So what I'm doing now, I'm actually blending with an eyeshadow brush. I just find it can give when these really lovely soft concealers, like this really creamy light texture, it just blends really nicely. And I think like I think you can see the difference between the two sides. Like that's much brighter from our little concealer moment.
Are you a makeup artist who likes to go for a colour lighter under the eyes, or are you not?
No, so I'm always you need to match the intensity of the problem with the intensity of the concealer.
Yeah.
And then you can brighten up afterwards.
Yeah.
So like for my dark circles, which are really dark, I use the hints in the medium tan. With the bulk of the product is on the inside corners, and then I have very little out here. And then what I always do, close, is I always blend on the eyelid as well, so that even if there's some leftover foundation on my hand or a concealer, as a quote primer, so it's not actually a primer, but to get rid of any like discoloration or pinkness or tiredness that's left on the eyelid.
Or any veiny eyelid.
So a minute ago, Mel was asking about correcting any sort of marks around the chin. So we've done a really light layer of foundation, and now again with a fluffy brush. I know this is odd. I use a fluffy brush. It's just that you're gonna deposit less product and be able to blend it out at the same time, and I feel like for me it has more control.
Okay, that's interesting. So I would always use a very tiny synthetic kind of pinpoint,
almost like a lip brush.
Yeah.
So I prefer doing this, and then you can kind of diffuse it over the area, and then here, let's just show people what we're doing. So I'm just kind of doing that, and then just blending it out, and always correct this lip corner. That's another little trick of mine. It always just makes you look a little more smiley. So on this side, so there's a bit left on my brush. I don't need to add. I'm just gonna, the tiniest bit, and these concealers, the hint one is really potent. So
very pigmented,
the tiniest amount.
I love this concealer so much.
I love this concealer, and also just a little word of how much do we love Meryl, who founded the brand.
We
love Meryl. So yeah, so if you have any bumps, spots, acne, irritation, redness, pimples, be it hormonal, be it because you ate something, be it because you're having a skincare moment, I find matching the coverage, so you need something that is as strong and as pigmented as the intensity of the quote problem, and that's really going to cover. And again, it's all about the tapping motion. As soon as you swipe, you get into problems because the skin is not the same as the skin on the rest of your face.
Yeah, and it moves the product around, doesn't it? You want to keep it in one place.
Exactly, it's inflamed, you know, the area is inflamed. And you may not be able to do much about the volume, but by keeping it flat and then mattifying it, you'll be able to kind of distract.
Yeah.
And then whatever's left on my brush, I sometimes have a little second moment. And another makeup artist trick is always cut off this little fold here.
Oh, yes. And then, because I get red in the corner there, which is not flattering.
Yeah, so as soon as you've cut off that line, as soon as you conceal that, it just lifts the face.
Amazing.
There we go. To finish the foundation and the base, always powder. Now, even if you have dry skin, if you've hydrated and everything properly, you should powder. Powdering really helps set the makeup, it helps hold it. And this one's a really fine, like bamboo silica. So this is how I use a loose powder.
Yeah.
And you use it in a super interesting way.
Yeah, so because I have oily skin, I use this after all of my skincare before applying my foundation. I'll use this just on my T-zone because it's so fine and it's so thin. It really primes the skin for makeup and it helps to stop any oil coming through.
That's amazing.
Throughout the day. So I'll use it exactly with a brush like this.
Yeah.
And just a little dusting on the T-zone.
And then put makeup on top of it.
And then put my
even liquid makeup.
Even liquid, yeah.
That's so cool.
Because it's so fine, it doesn't give a powdery finish.
No, it's really like, I'm trying it for the first time just a minute ago, and it really just disappears. So
like
I always tap into the lid, kind of shake off the excess, and always right away in the area that needs it most, which tends to be the T-zone. For some people it's different, but like 90% it's the T-zone. And we've gone for a really natural skin coverage. We're not doing too much, so it's not like one color everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's also not completely translucent. And then I tend to kind of buff, but always last motion is out and down, so that all the little tiny hairs on your face rest downwards, always.
That's such a good tip.
So some people just keep buffing and buffing and buffing and buffing, and you kind of can if you're a makeup artist or you're a trained professional, because there is an aspect of buffing to the makeup that I really like. But always finish in these downward motion. And then here on our chin, where we've had to put a bit more product, again, back to the tapping. And I'm a big fan of a powder puff. I use washable puffs. And so you can use a puff with this and just kind of really press gently into the skin, or use your brush as you would a puff, and then just kind of, it's like press and then stop.
Yeah.
Just don't touch it anymore.
If you're buffing too much over that area, it's going to move.
It moves the makeup too
around,
much. So where there's thin coverage, you can get away with buffing, but where you need to stay in place, just pat.
Yeah.
And then close. Always just do another little moment on the eyelids. Again, just to eliminate any oil or anything that might be left behind. Super!